Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the March Patch Tuesday webinar. We are ready to get started here. So we have a fortunately rather boring Patch Tuesday. So I think this will we'll get started here, but we're going to get right into bulletins pretty quick here today because there wasn't a whole lot going on. I think all the action really happened after February's Patch Tuesday. So we're going to cover a couple of things from that, and then we'll get into today's. There's one advisory that we're going to talk about. We did have the 5 updates, bulletins, as it were, that we're going to be talking about from the Microsoft side. And Google Chrome did drop, but it dropped later in the day. So that was after all of our production work was already done. So yes, the Chrome update did release. We got that in. There's one CVE that Todd will be mentioning there, but all good on that front. So Microsoft and Google were kind of the main two yesterday. A couple of things from a news perspective. So in the February Patch Tuesday release, it also sounded kind of boring at the time. There were no 0 days on Patch Tuesday, but literally the next day, that's when the real fun kind of started. And by fun, I do mean that it wasn't very much fun for those who were affected by this. So the first that got impacted was the Exchange vulnerability that Microsoft had resolved on Patch Tuesday. The next day, there was a confirmed exploits of that vulnerability. So this is the CVE. Where is it? Oh, this article had it way down here. 2024-21410. So after this kind of came out, there were a number of articles there. This is not in the, I didn't have this link in the deck there, but it's been out for a couple of weeks now. Most of you who have Exchange in your environments are aware of this and have already been working on it. In fact, I worked with a number of companies who were using Exchange and using other technologies of ours too, just to make sure that when they did the Exchange update, because it was changing how authentication was being enforced, there were a lot of concerns about, what additional downstream impacts were there. So we ended up doing some quick regression testing of other technologies to make sure that communications-wise, this update to Exchange would not have been affected, primarily on our MDM side. So reports from our customers were all confirming that the interactions with our products were all good, but there definitely were some interactions elsewhere in some of those environments. So if you did have, some of those challenges, there's, details out there from other organizations on things that they've run into. But the article here is talking about the specific exploit and which, where it kind of hit most. So that is the first one of the 0 days that are not 0 days. They call them 1 day exploits, something that comes out just after an update has been made available. So that one was exploited and came up literally the day after. That is when we started to notice that Microsoft made a couple of changes to how they're handling things like this that occur. So interesting, it seems to have been from this February date going forward. Microsoft has added kind of 2 new things to how they're tracking when an update or when a vulnerability gets updated. So the first thing here is this recently updated tag at the very top. They've always had the last updated versus released. So that kind of gave you an idea of what was going on there. But they've kind of made it much more clear that that update was changed after the fact. The other thing that they've done now that they have not done previously is they actually came back and updated the CVE to confirm that it was exploited. Typically, or historically, I should say, Microsoft had done this as, the day that it was first published, they kept that publicly disclosed and exploited based on that. But they actually did come back and updated the exploited and exploitation detected on there as well. So they're getting better about communicating that information out so that when you go back and try to look up something and try to confirm anything, you're going to get more of that relevant information. So that's a very positive change there. But you could see here, the 13th is when this update first published. The 14th, they updated the exploited flag because they were made aware of the attacks that were going on. And the 15th, they did some additional FAQ information regarding, the changes and more as more information was coming out. Most recently, there were some final changes on March 1st. But that's the update, all the information in the FAQ. There's a lot of relevant information there if you're still working through or trying to get that resolved. If you were one of those organizations that had issues after turning on the enhanced protection or the extended protection for authentication, that again, once you turned that on, there was a potential for downstream things to be affected. So if you're still working through some of those issues there, there's still an urgency to get this update in place because of the attacks going on there. Second vulnerability that came to light after PatchTuesday last month was the kernel level zero-day bug in Windows. There's kind of some back and forth over how long ago was it known. Regardless, Microsoft resolved 2024.21338 on the February PatchTuesday. After that, they did find that there were active exploits going on with this vulnerability. So once that came to light, Microsoft again updated the bulletin page. You can see here that it was last updated on February 28th. You got that recently updated tag now, kind of showing that this was changed. And again, they came back and updated that exploited and exploitability assessment. If we go down to the history of this one, the 15th, they're updated one or more CVSS scores. So they updated the CVSS score at that time. It wasn't until the 28th of February that the exploit was confirmed. So this one came out a couple of weeks after PatchTuesday, but definitely came up, and there were confirmed attacks happening in the wild there. So that was kind of all of the post-February excitement. This month, as we got into March, Apple did have a couple of zero-day vulnerabilities as well. So they did a rapid response release for iOS and iPad. So this one, you could get the details here about, this is in today's deck, but there's an article here that links to the update page, which I'll share in a second here. But the two CVEs that were actively exploited there, so that you have that information. And Apple did release this update on March 5th. So this one's pretty recent. If you have iOS and iPad devices that are still being updated, again, those two vulnerabilities are actively being exploited. So the last bit of news is more of just a heads up. This is an advisory and probably minimal effect. Again, this is on the Exchange side. Microsoft released this advisory yesterday during PatchTuesday, and it covers a deprecation of functionality. So Microsoft was using this Oracle library in Exchange Server, the Oracle outside-in technology. The component was doing file scanning. So I did a little bit of research just to kind of get a better understanding of what this was used for. So there's a lot of files that transact through Exchange Server, obviously, as attachments or other things. This SDK from Oracle was used to try to scan unspecified files and make sense of them. Microsoft didn't give exactly clear, understanding of exactly what was going on there, but based on some of the language they're using here, they are going to be releasing a more modern in-house file scanning solution to replace Oracle's outside-in technology. So this component was used for file scanning within Exchange, and they're basically shutting that binary down and replacing it with something homegrown. So they talk a little bit about the stages for this. There's going to be 3 stages to this deprecation. The first phase is disabling the Oracle outside-in technology for all file types. So the release that they just released yesterday, these are the 3 versions and CU levels that were released. Those are going to be disabling the Oracle outside-in technology. The second phase is going to be to introduce this modern in-house file scanning solution that Microsoft is referring to. So their own solution for doing this type of file scanning. The third phase will be completely removing the OIT code from Exchange Server. Now, they did say the first phase was available by installing the March 2024 security updates listed in the table below. They did not say when phase 2 or phase 3 are going to be executed. So for those of you that might have been relying on this technology, in the release, they're updating to version 8.5.7, which addresses some of the known vulnerabilities documented at this link. So that's trying to mitigate the issues that they were concerned about in the OIT library. While the code has not been removed yet, the module is not used to scan file types by default, and instead alternative file scanning modules will be used. So that's what they're stating there. But there are ways to update or to turn back on the OIT module temporarily if you feel that you need it for the short term until more of Microsoft's second phase is in place on this. So that documentation is in this script here. You can go and get that information to figure out how to turn OIT back on. Microsoft, for the second phase, Exchange Server 2019 CU15, Microsoft is going to be introducing this new in-house scanning option that will be replacing the OIT module. So most likely in an upcoming PatchTuesday release, we can expect to see that, or whenever this 2019 CU15 comes out. So that's kind of the phase 2 best information that they are providing there. Is we're watching for 2019 CU15 as the point where they're going to introduce that new replacement scanning module. So that's all we know about that one. And that kind of wraps up the major things that came up as of yesterday's PatchTuesday event. On the Linux side, there were a couple of vulnerabilities that our friends over at TuxCare have outlined as kind of the things to look out for here. The first one of those, 2024-0565, CVSS score of 8.8. It's an out-of-bounds memory read flaw, and it's in the Linux kernel. It can allow an attacker to cause a denial of service or possibly expose sensitive information. So the SMB client is basically where this it's Common Internet File System, CIFS, is a file access storage protocol, and allows the devices to share files with the server and with other peripheral devices like printers. So take a look for that CVE. Depending on what Linux distributions you're running, they may be releasing over a period of time. Again, the TuxCare has that CVE tracking page that we've shared previously that makes it really easy to go and track that across multiple Linux platforms. So one to watch out for there, though. The second one is actually for CVE from 2023, 2023-3824. This one has a CVSS score of 9.8. It's a vulnerability in PHP. So if you are using PHP, potential memory corruption impacts PHP on CentOS and Ubuntu. Depending on, again, you might want to keep a look for others, but the way the Linux world works, it may take a little while for all the different flavors to kind of track that vulnerability back to if it's on their platforms as well. But that's the two that they called out here specifically. And the third one, 2024-25617, CVSS score of 8.6. Squid proxy, if you're using Squid proxy, the caching proxy for web support. This is a denial of service attack that could potentially be utilized here. There is some mitigation potentially available. So if you are using Squid proxy and updates may not be available yet for what versions you're running on, you can upgrade to version 6.5. Oh, they did say there's no known workarounds right now for that. So interesting that they used mitigation, but yeah, it's That's usually not how I would use the term mitigation, but so upgrading to version 6.5 is the solution that's available for that right now. Okay, servicing stack updates. There were a few for Server 2012 and 2012 R2, and then for Windows 10 and Windows 10 version 1607 and Server 2016. So 4 OS versions got a servicing stack update this month. Lifecycle-wise, no major lifecycle changes happening right now. We are seeing end of support for 21H2 coming up in June of 24. So that's one to keep an eye out for there. And then it looks like later in the year, 22H2 and 21H2 for Enterprise and Education Edition are going to be later in the year. So June 2024 for the Windows 10 Enterprise and EDU Edition for 21H2 is the next to watch out for there for Windows Lifecycle. And I think on the server side, no immediate changes here. January was still the most recent one for the Windows Server 2019 edition. Mainstream support ended in January, but extended support will be going out to January 2029. So a little ways to go there. All right. On that then, Todd, go ahead and take it over.
Okay, everyone. Happy March Patch Tuesday here. So as Chris mentioned, Google Chrome did drop late in the day yesterday. Only one CVE that was listed in there, the 2024-2400, as I have listed down below here. They have that listed as a high vulnerability. Again, they mentioned there were 3 security fixes, but they only addressed, they only called out one CVE, so kind of be aware of that one. But again, as usual, include that in your normal updates for your browsers. Windows 11 update yesterday, kind of a standard update as far as that goes. They did address 39 vulnerabilities in the particular product as they were going through the various operating systems. Of course, they did release updates for all 3, 21H2, 22H2, and 23H2. So be aware of that one. Interesting, you don't see tampering included very often in the CVE list, the known impact list. But there was one about tampering in this month, so I will take a look at that and read about it. On the Windows 10 side, also of interest is that there are no known updates, no known issues, I should say, for Windows 11 this month. On the Windows 10 side, the same similar group of vulnerabilities, 39, slightly different vulnerabilities, actually, a few here and there that were different, but the same number, 39 vulnerabilities addressed this month. Updates across all the known and supported versions of Windows 10, all the way from 1607 through the latest Server 2022 data center versions. So all your standard Windows 10 updates. No really additional known issues. They've carried these 2 forward now for quite a few months. Copilot not supported is kind of an issue right now. I saw in the chat there was a question about things disappearing on your screen. This has to do with whether the taskbar is positioned horizontally on the top and bottom of your screen. It has to do with interaction with Copilot. I think I said a couple of months ago, one of the things that Microsoft did when they developed Copilot, it was done specifically for Windows 11, and then they backported it to Windows 10. And there are a few features in there that don't work quite right. And one of these has to do with the taskbar, so be aware of that one. There's also some issues with icons moving around unexpectedly between monitors. Again, this particular known issue has been carried forward for quite a while as well. Chris talked quite a bit about Exchange Server and some of the issues that have been going on there. They did release updates for the currently supported versions, 2016 CU23, which is the latest one that's supported on 2016, and 2019 cumulative update 13 and 14. So those are also supported. They only address one vulnerability. Note that that one vulnerability is rated as important, so not a critical update this month as you put together your priorities for updates and take a look at those. Chris also was talking about the fact that they're pulling out the Oracle outside-in technology and slowly going to phase it out over time. There was an issue, a number of known issues around this. The first one here in particular, if you pull up these links that I have in here for the various articles about these known issues, the first one has to do with actually certain files not being displayed properly in the web version when you pull it down. And this has to do with the fact that they've disabled the scanning of those files. Chris touched on this earlier. And there are some workarounds that they recommend that you do in there and go in and configure, but it looks like this is going to be a little bit of a rocky road until they get their new scanning technology fully implemented to look at the various files that are being pulled down, whether they're graphic images or other things in the Exchange Server files themselves, the webmail. So be aware of that. They also have an issue with download domains are no longer working as expected. Again, another side effect of the changes that they're making here. And finally, they also talk about the web deep test probe and the backend logon probe are no longer working. So take a close look this month as you do your Exchange updates against these particular articles that I've listed here. They go through and provide some temporary workaround options, but it's going to be when they introduce the next phase, when they introduce their own scanning technology, hopefully we'll get over this hump and this will get cleaned up. So just be aware there are a number of known issues for Exchange Server this month if you do this update. Interestingly, a very light update on the Office side. There was only a single update from Microsoft 365 apps. So one vulnerability addressed. It's an elevation of privilege vulnerability. It's kind of interesting that it does allow an authenticated user to gain system privileges. You can go in and take a look at that. It's vulnerability 26199. But again, a very light update this month on the Office side. And finally, we did see an update for SharePoint Server this month. Again, only one vulnerability. Again, this is only rated important this month, but it does actually allow potential to download a malicious file and allow remote access for remote code execution. There were updates for the 3 supported versions, of course, the Subscription Edition, the Enterprise Server 2016, and SharePoint Server 2019. So there were updates for all 3 of those that address this particular vulnerability. So a very light release from Microsoft, as Chris kind of began the presentation today. Talking about what came out between the Patch Tuesdays, however, we did have a lot of software releases. We break it down into security updates with CVEs that I'll include here on the next couple of slides. Again, these are what are reported by the various vendors. We had 3 Chrome updates, for example, that had CVEs specifically called out. You'll note down below there actually are some Chrome updates that are non-security type updates as well. So depends upon what's being released by the vendor and what we report. We know that a lot of the updates, the vendors say that they are security updates, but they don't particularly call out any CVE information for us, so they're lumped into the second category here. And finally, we have those non-security updates where the vendor said this is just a performance enhancement or whatever they might call out as specific to the particular updates there. And so we kind of break these out. Here's what came out on the CVE with CVEs reported. As I mentioned, we had the 3 Chrome updates, a large one here back on February 20th. That included 10 vulnerabilities. This particular one here had 3 vulnerabilities. There was a Docker for Windows update that addressed 4 vulnerabilities this month between the Patch Tuesdays. We continue to get Firefox updates, of course, throughout the month as needed. This month they had one actually on the 20th as well, and a Firefox ESR 115.8.0 update, Thunderbird update from Mozilla as well. We did see Foxit PDF Editor get an update, and some single vulnerability reported there across all 3 versions that they support there, Reader and Editor. And finally, some updates for VMware Workstation Player and Pro. So take those into account if you haven't addressed those throughout the month. On the Apple side, we did have some OS updates, basically all 3 that Apple currently supports, Monterey, Sonoma, and Ventura. You'll see those here in just a second, the size of those. Apple Safari, of course, got a browser update as well. Be aware that on the Safari side, the actual browser updates are included with the Sonoma updates, whereas there are separate standalone updates for Monterey and Ventura. We did see a lot of non-security updates as well this month for Apple apps that we included. On the Monterey side, which is the oldest version that they're still supporting, there were 26 vulnerabilities addressed. You can go in and take a look at the Apple bulletin. I have the link here if you want to read through all of those. On the Ventura side, 26 vulnerabilities as well. And the latest version, macOS Sonoma, which is 14.4 that was released. Note that there was a large number, 68 vulnerabilities addressed this month. And so go in and take a look at that if you're interested. And as I said, on the Safari side, there was a separate 17.4 update for Ventura and Monterey, and 6 vulnerabilities that were addressed in there. On the third-party side, we had some Chrome updates throughout the month. Should always, of course, keep your browsers up to date as well there if you're using Chrome on Mac. We saw Firefox and Thunderbird. These are pretty much identical to what was released on the Windows side in terms of vulnerabilities that were addressed. And finally, we have Microsoft Edge, of course, running on Macs as well. And they released some updates throughout the month here on the 29th and the 7th of March. The last one included just 3 vulnerabilities. So with that, Chris, that's the kind of the summary in terms of all the updates between this last Patch Tuesday and between the Patch Tuesdays. What do we have here on the question side?
Yeah, so we got through most of the questions so far. There were a couple of them that probably, just more for the broader audience, that if there's anybody seeing similar. One of the questions raised was around, was there a print spooler vulnerability resolved in this update? Yes, there was at least one. So Mark had a question about if there was. Don't know if Mark was experiencing some impacts there, but it's been a little while since. After Print Nightmare, many of you remember every other month there were a slew of CVEs being resolved on the print spooler, and a lot of people were experiencing some kind of printer fallout from a lot of that. It's been pretty quiet for the most part, so typically I've been keeping an eye out for, but I haven't been really bringing up print spooler as a, hey, print spooler's out here again, make sure to do some more thorough testing because things had quieted down. But depending on if anybody else was experiencing some challenges there, yes, there was a print spooler CVE resolved this month. So if you do see anything quirky with printing, just be aware that there was at least one CVE resolved there. The other one that was brought up was KB 5034765. There were some late February, there was some news that went out about this one as well around that particular KB, the OS update for Windows 11, causing issues for people. There were reports of it stopping at 96% progress and hanging there. And then there were also some sporadic cases of the taskbar disappearing. And that was one of the comments from, let's see here, Andrea was asking about that. Microsoft didn't really have much detail out there other than they acknowledged that there were some challenges there and that they were going to be resolving those. Todd, I don't think they really confirmed anything in the Windows update or the Windows 11 update this month that calling that one out specifically, did they?
I didn't see anything, no.
Okay. So for those of you who might have experienced the issues from last month's update, unconfirmed whether this month's OS update is going to resolve those issues, approach with caution. Is kind of the best guidance we can give without more direct kind of confirmation from Microsoft that they've resolved those issues. So those are the two things that I think were coming up that were worth sharing more about. Okay, so Long just confirmed that they did say it was fixed in the latest update. Thank you, Long, for confirming that. Sometimes it's hard to track down those things because if they didn't have it as an original known issue, they don't have a place to update it in the KBs sometimes. Okay, I think double checking just to make sure we've got to everybody. She was asking if that was the same one we're mentioning for Windows 11. So that it is the same kernel version. So if you were having that on the server side, that same issue of like taskbar disappearing or the update hanging and crashing when it's nearing completion around that 96% mark, yes, that would have been the same issue for both the desktop version or the server version, if that's the case you're seeing there. Yeah, it looks like that was the same. Maybe a different error code on that one. So that could be a different error code, but I would say best to track back to Microsoft and see if it is related, because the KB that they were specifically listing in the error code in the article that I'm looking at are a little bit different than the ones that you were seeing. Let's see. Did Microsoft change their download URLs for Visual Studio?
Might be a long question.
Yeah, long. You might need to take a look at that one and see if there's anything you guys ran into there. Luis's question is in the main inbox right now. Let's see. There's a question about Exchange Server that I need to see if that's the one we already talked about or if it's something new.
That's the one on the 0-day initiative you're looking at, Chris?
Yeah, let's just take a look at that one. Yeah, they don't have a CVE ID on that, and without that, I'm going to have a near zero chance of finding if Microsoft has actually resolved something. Sorry, David. I don't know if we're going to be able to answer that question for you. Looks like the 0-day initiative reported that to Microsoft, but there was no CVE ID ever reported for that, and there hasn't been any word on it since late last year. So, good question. I would say right now, based on the facts there, it sounds like that one's still outstanding. So Daryl had a question: were there any 0 days from this month? No. Right now, the March PatchTuesday update had no additional 0 days. The only ones we touched on were the 2 February CVEs from Microsoft that were exploited after PatchTuesday. That was the Exchange vulnerability and the Kernel vulnerability. And then Apple had 2, but those were resolved last week in their March 5th update for iOS and iPadOS. That's all we were seeing for 0 days, everything leading up to this, but no new ones introduced yesterday. There were a couple of interesting ones. There was actually a 9.8 CVSS score that was only rated as important, and there was a 5.5 CVSS score that was rated as critical. So it was kind of an interesting read to go through some of Microsoft's vulnerabilities there. The critical vulnerabilities, though, there were 2 critical CVEs that Microsoft resolved. Both of those are in this month's OS update, and both relating to Hyper-V. So for those of you running Hyper-V, that seems to have been the riskiest CVEs that were out there. So your VMs running on Hyper-V, all of the Windows OSs were or included those 2 CVEs. So those would be the 2 to get resolved more urgently. The Office 365 update and the other ones that there were no public disclosures or 0 days confirmed on anything else. But again, February being an example, just because there's nothing happening right now doesn't mean it won't start happening very shortly, or could already be in progress, just not yet discovered or identified. So always best to keep a kind of a continuous flow around that. One of the things that we've seen a lot more organizations trying to strive for is to have kind of 2 parallel update tracks. One where they do their regular kind of monthly maintenance, and another kind of priority update bucket where they're doing faster response to different things. So Google Chrome, as an example, they're releasing every week. They basically, as of August last year, they said expect a security update every week. Todd and I have looked at a few of the different vendors and how they're kind of responding to things. And with the browsers especially, it would be good to have a weekly, at least, kind of update track for applications like the browsers to be continuously updated. And anytime you get something that's actively being targeted, having a process to get those into that priority update bucket for more frequent update, especially for the end user environments. That's the way a lot of organizations are starting to run. It's harder to do for the server side, absolutely, but there you're typically layering on additional security measures. The end user side is where footholds typically begin, And that's where they're going to get a lot of the identities that they're going to try to steal from your environment as well. So that's where having that priority update bucket on at least a weekly basis, if not more frequent, helps you to reduce your risk significantly by continuously being able to update things throughout your environment. So, all right.
Chris, one comment real quick.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So I wrote about this in a forecast article that I put together for Help Net Security. And you'll see this in the April releases is what we're hearing right now. Microsoft has announced that they are going to be putting some nag pop-ups in Windows 10 specifically to upgrade from outdated versions. They're also going to be doing some forced upgrades on Windows 11. So there have been a couple of blogs on this. Patchmanagement.org has been commenting on it, and a few others. And we're supposed to see that in April for the first time. And these are primarily designed for non-managed machines. So it's going to be interesting to kind of see how these manifest in various organizations. But just kind of a heads up on that, and we'll probably have more information on that in the April Patch Tuesday for sure.
All right. I think we've gotten all the questions that came up. So thank you everyone for joining us this month. And we're looking forward to seeing you again in April. Actually, in April, we're going to have an interesting one. I'm going to be at our event, customer-facing event in Dallas, Texas. And it happens to fall on Patch Tuesday and the day of the webinar as well. So I'm actually going to be doing the Patch Tuesday webinar live from more of a studio setup next month. Todd will be streaming in remotely, but we're actually going to be opening it up to any of our ISS participants who are there in person. There will be a session in the session track where you'll be able to actually join live in person if you want to see the webinar with me down at the event. So yeah, next month there'll be a little bit more production behind this. We're working with our production team to get everything organized and make sure that we've got everything worked out to try to do everything without any issues. But it'll be interesting to see how we can pull off live video feed, live studio audience, and patching Todd in remotely to do our webinar next month. So looking forward to it. Yep, should be good. So any of you who are going to the event live, it'll be great to see you in person. Thanks. Talk to you guys next month.
See y'all.